All right, in this lesson, there's 4 different math lessons. I'm gonna take you through each one. So when we talk about the rule of 3, all you really need is a stick. You can use a ruler or a meter stick, or you could just use a stick, find out the height of the stick. Back in the day though, people didn't have rulers. They sure didn't have plastic rulers. Maybe they had some type of measuring tape, like on fabric, for fabric measuring tape. Otherwise, they would just use string. And then they would use their own measurements. So things weren't very exact. All right, so on a ruler, you have millimeters, these tiny, tiny little marks here. And there's 300 millimeters here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And at the 10 mark, there's centimeters. So 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3, 30 centimeters. So centimeters, you can remember that a millimeter is like as thick as your nail, your thumbnail. It's pretty tiny. Whereas a centimeter is about as thick as your pinky nail. And then maybe you want to go a bit bigger. It's going to take you an awful long time to measure this in millimeters or centimeters. So if I wanted to measure a pencil, yes, I could measure it like this, and it's 15 centimeters, but I could also use inches on the other side. And an inch was about a thumb width, the fattest part of your thumb. And keep in mind, every hand is different, so these aren't very exact, but that's what an inch is. So you might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. So this is 2.5 inches. Different measurements would have been used, of course, for different things. Measuring a pile of twigs to make a bushel, that would have been using centimeters or inches. It would be like 1 inch thick bushel. But then if you wanted to measure the height of a tree, you certainly want to move to something bigger like a foot. So a ruler is a foot. It's 12 inches. Okay, so 30 centimeters, a little over 30 centimeters, makes a foot. And if you hold it up to your foot, oh, I can't even lift my foot. I'm gonna do it though. You'll see my dirty sock. Is it about? No, my foot's smaller, way smaller, because the original foot was actually a king's foot. And this is probably about the size of a grown man's foot. All right, so that's where the term foot comes from. If you don't know anything about rulers, I really recommend that you trace a ruler and just practice drawing millimeters, centimeters, and inches, and feet. Have those 4 units ready to go in your mind. But we're gonna focus on how to find the height of a tree. We actually did this outside, but I'm just showing you in my book. So the first thing we did was we grabbed a stick. I'm gonna draw my stick. And we stuck it in the ground, just like we're told to. So let me just read this here. I'll read our instructions. How to find the height of a tree. First, drive a stick into the ground. Measure the length of the stick. So then we find out, okay, this stick was, let's say, 1 foot tall. 1 foot. 1 foot. Next, measure the length of the stick's shadow. So we had to do this on a sunny day, of course, because the sun casts a shadow. And the time of day that you do this will make the shadow longer in the morning or evening and shorter as the sun gets higher above. So you can see the shadow on here, the light is coming from this way, casting a shadow. So if this is my stick outside, the shadow's teeny weeny. If I move it like that though, it'll cast a longer shadow. So it has to be straight up, first of all, 90 degrees with the ground. Second of all, it doesn't matter how short or long your shadow is. The math will still be the same because you're doing everything at the same time. So let's use this little teeny weeny shadow as an example. So here we go, we're just gonna draw teeny weeny shadow. And I even did like shadow rays so you could see. So here's the length of the shadow. It's definitely shorter. I'm gonna say it's half a foot. And we want to keep all our measurements the same, but half is kind of weird to use, or 0.5 feet. So I might actually want to look at how many centimeters that is. So if I look at, remember a foot is 12 inches. So I could say 12 inches. And then what's half of 12? 6 inches. Now I'm actually working with some things that make more sense. 12 and 6, all right? Next, I have a tree. A ginormous tree that I'm gonna cut down. Too big to climb up and measure, too big to put string up. It's huge. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna use the same thing. Here's my huge tree. I'm gonna find the shadow of the tree instead. I take the shadow. Here we go. And remember, the sun's at the same height in the sky. We're doing this right at the same time. The shadow of the tree stops right here. I can see there's no shadow past that. So what do? I measure this distance and I walk and walk and walk and walk and walk and walk and walk. And if I have string, I can stretch it out. We used a measuring tape, but maybe I have a ruler. So I get my friend to stand here and put their finger there. Then I move it forward and I move it forward and I move it forward and so on. Then I find out this distance was 60 feet. It was really, really far. We used a measuring tape and it was about 60 feet actually. So that's 60 of these rulers. But remember, we're talking about inches. So we need to convert that. We need to times it by 12 because remember there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 inches in a foot. So we're gonna times it by 12 to get our inches. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 6 is 12. Then I'm gonna go to the next tens group. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 6 is 6. And you add those two numbers together and you get 720 inches. So now I have 1, 2, 3 numbers. Rule of 3, here we go. So we have the stick length. The stick length, 12. Over top of the stick's shadow, 6, equals the tree's height, I don't know. Over top of the tree shadow, 720. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You could say 6 goes into 720. How many times? What do you need to multiply? And whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. You could cross multiply and say this times this and that times that. Or you could reduce this fraction to 2 over 1. And that would make things a lot easier for when you're trying to translate, because then that means if 1 times 1 equals this, 2 times, oh, we're doing reverse multiplication rather. So then we have, it's going to be double this, right? Because 2 is double that. So 720 and 720 equals 1,440 inches. Now, inches is a pretty ridiculous way to measure a tree. Do you think I'm going to get 1,440 of these out? No. So you could convert it back into feet by dividing this time. So we multiplied to get it into inches. So if we get it back into feet, we have to divide. 12 goes into 1,440. Well, 12 goes into 14 once. I used 12. I subtract that. I have 2 left over. Bring down my 4. 12 goes into 24 twice. I have 0 left over. Bring down my 0 and 0. So 1,440 inches is the same as 120 feet. So how tall is my tree? 120 feet. So you could cross multiply, or you can do to the bottom, whatever you did to the bottom, you do to the top. Cross multiply, or you can simply reduce your fraction and look at it that way. Those are 3 different ways to do that. Okay, that's how you're going to use the rule of 3 to measure a really tall height, like a tree or a building. If you weren't quite sure how that worked, the most important thing is that you can set up the stick length, the stick's shadow equals mystery number over the tree's shadow. If you can set that up, then you can have someone help you find that mystery number with some more complicated math.